everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time for another Spawn Daily. Quick reminder what we're doing. 30th anniversary of Spawn, 30th anniversary of Image. And being that Rocky and I, neither one of us has ever read the entirety of Spawn, and Todd McFarlane has started this new shared Spawn universe and hoping that it grows organically into a shared superhero universe in the Image comic superhero universe, which is sort of nebulous and tenuous at best. And certainly in the early issues that we've read, a lot of Youngblood crossovers and references to other early Image titles. You can sort of see that maybe he wanted that all along. But anyway, he started it on his own with Gunslinger Spawn and King Spawn and the Scorched. His Spawn Universe special last year kicked it off. And I really want to understand the context and be able to follow those books. But when I read them, there's a lot of references to things that I don't have any frame of reference for because I've never read Spawn. Now, I already had a desire when there was a lot of fanfare and Spawn sort of got back on the radar of a lot of people, myself included, when Todd McFarlane broke the previously held record for longest creator-owned book, which had previously been 300 issues, which was Cerebus by Dave Sim. So I planned on reading it then. That was a couple of years ago already, and I just hadn't found the time. And so finally this year for the holidays, always like to do something special, counting down to Christmas. Rocky and I did 12 days of Spawnmas, and we counted down the days to Christmas by reading the first 12 issues of Spawn. And I hadn't read a lot of that stuff in decades, and I was surprised how well it held up. It was really interesting to read it. I think I read each of them as they came out and never touched them again. And sometimes there was months between issues because McFarlane suffered from a lot of the same delays that a lot of other early Image founders did, which, looking back on it in hindsight 2020, you can sort of understand. I mean, they were rock stars at the time. They'd started their own company. They were able to successfully break away from Marvel, and they had all these people that were wanting to talk to them, and they were being pulled in all these different directions. So it's kind of hard, when you get money and attention and all that, to just focus on just sitting down and creating the book. But again, when you look back on it, Spawn is one of the ones that that really kind of kept on more of a regular schedule than anything else did. So and again, a lot of the ideas really hold up. Now, some of it's of its time in terms of being expositional, and certainly no subtlety from Todd McFarlane in a lot of what's there. The bad guys aren't mustache twirling per se, but there's certainly no redeeming qualities. There's no nuance. And there's a lot of reference to 90s stuff, which sort of dates the books and whatnot. But for the most part, it's an intriguing story. So really been enjoying it. Been reading one issue a day, talking about it. So hopefully we're going to continue that into the new. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive into issue 41, which is the issue we're going to talk about today. We saw in issue 40, well, you know what, why don't I share my screen and then you can see it for yourself. So yeah, we've got a Capullo cover, and as they've started to do, we've got this paragraph of summary here, and it really sums up what happened in issue 40 very, very well. So Spawn finds several bums messing with his throne. Unbeknownst to them, or Spawn, these bums have booby-trapped it, so the throne shocks Spawn, renders him unconscious. They use a forklift, they throw his body in a crate, and they take him somewhere. We don't know where at that moment. We check in on Terry and Wanda. They're both trying to understand Spawn's involvement in both the government and their lives. And we also saw that Cy-Gor was out in the wilderness after the guy, Chris, had basically freed it or awakened it from its slumber in that sort of haunted mansion looking thing, and when the pursuit by the local sheriff actually put a little boy's life in danger, Cy-Gor actually protected him. So is Cy-Gor a bad guy? Is he not? We don't know. But the scene then shifts to an unconscious Spawn as he awakens, and he finds out that the guy that booby-trapped his throne was Curse, and he's actually dissecting Spawn to find out how exactly Spawn's body works. Now, I just mentioned that for the most part, partly in thanks to these summaries, this paragraph of summary on the inside cover, we hadn't seen big dialogue dumps. I've talked in the past couple of issues about not having big walls of text. I guess McFarlane just wants to remind us that he's still McFarlane, because this time, for the first time in a long time, when I opened it up, I kind of groaned. You can see it's all blacked out. I've blacked it out here because I like to black out the words, because I don't want somebody to just be able to watch the video and read the comic. Go buy the comic. Support McFarlane. Support Comixology. Support comics and read it for yourself. But be that as it may, there was a giant wall of text here, talking about Armageddon, talking about who Spawn is, talking about what spawns in general are, and angels. You know, they're meant to be trained on Earth to then be leaders, lieutenants, whatever, in the armies of heaven and hell when the final confrontation is at hand. So a big dialogue box, big expositional dump here, which I like I said, I don't feel it was necessary. Maybe McFarlane, hey, remember, I still do this from time to time. I mean, that's all I can think. But then the scene does shift to Spawn on this table where he's being dissected. You can see in the background there's a leg, there's an arm. Curse is talking about how it feels to be trapped in the hands of a superior and to be tortured. And he's talking about, you know, this is how I felt when I was pinned against the wall when you had me. And you know, you are made of necroflesh or psychoplasm or whatever it's called, and that is the vessel for evil, and evil's what's powering you, and I'm going to take you apart piece by piece and find out what makes you tick, and in that way, I'll either be able to take the power for myself, or I'll have control over it, in that I'll be able to prevent that power from coming to Earth again, and in that way, even though he feels abandoned by God, he will have his own power on Earth, because he will be able to suppress and keep evil powers from coming to Earth. At least that's what he thinks. So he's preparing the different body parts. You can see in the panel on the lower right there. He's preparing different body parts to be shipped to different parts of the world. He says he has a bunch of other allies, as it were, that all have a passion for the purity of God, and they're all going to study it and figure out the way things work. And Spawn's sort of left on the table, and he kind of passes out, and he's remembering back. And this is the first time we get to flash back and see some history of Al Simmons, like way back when he was just a teenager in Vietnam. And he's remembering a time that's similar to what he's going through here, where he was a prisoner of war. So him and one other of his members in his unit got captured. And it's pretty brutal and graphic, actually. So for whatever reason, I don't know, coin flip or whatever, they chose the other guy to cut on first. So they would ask Al Simmons questions, and if he wouldn't answer, they would cut off a piece of his buddy's body, basically. So it's pretty brutal. Now his buddy they both agreed. They both told each other, don't tell him anything. Don't betray the rest of our unit. Don't put the rest of our friends in danger. If we have to sacrifice ourselves, we have to sacrifice. So he had this other guy's blessing. But it's still brutal. I mean, you see there's a foot cut off, there's a hand cut off, there's an ear cut off, there's a nose cut off, there's a tongue cut out. Like it's pretty brutal. So eventually his buddy dies, and then they start working on Al Simmons, or they're about to, when all of a sudden he's saved. We're told that he's saved by a soldier called Cy-Gor, who taught him how to kill, how to be, you know, a better soldier. But I mean, kind of an interesting name, like Cy-Gor. So was he rescued by a Vietnamese soldier? Was it was an American soldier who's just been there for a long time? Like we're not sure. That's all we get, but enough to whet the appetite. I do like what's going on here, and I really like the sepia tones, and I think the art is really good as well. Oh, and I should say, you know what? We read the summary. Let me jump back here. Todd McFarlane, Greg Capullo, Todd McFarlane story, Greg Capullo on pencils, Todd McFarlane ink. So that's pretty standard, except when we have the Tony Daniel issues. Tom Orzechowski on letters has been on every single issue to this point, I think. But if you notice, there's a new color artist. We have Brian Haberlin with J.D. Smith and Dan Kemp, and also a special thanks to Danny Mickey. So I did want to point that out, that we have a new color artist on the book. And Brian Haberlin, I think he sticks with him for quite a while, because he's definitely a colorist that has worked with McFarlane Productions for quite a while. So anyway, like I said, I love the kind of sepia tones and getting some history on Al Simmons. Meanwhile, Jason Wynn's gotten out of the hospital. He goes back to his office. Who's waiting for him there but the Violator? So right away in this issue, we're getting a lot of the things that I was sort of nitpicking that we hadn't gotten. We hadn't checked in on Jason Wynn. We hadn't checked in on the Violator. We hadn't checked in on Sam and Twitch. We got a little bit of Wanda and Terry. So it seems like McFarlane at least was aware, hey, we really need to check on these guys. So the Violator and Wynn have a conversation, and the Violator basically tells him, hey, I've been upholding my end of the bargain. You know, you got a lot of eyes on you right now, which is really interesting, right? So all this time, Wynn was doing whatever the hell he wanted to do. Nobody was paying him any attention, and he was able to manipulate all kinds of things. And now that his office has been attacked by Spawn, all of a sudden he doesn't have the power to manipulate things anymore. Maybe he's worried that people are watching too close, or he can't give the appearance of doing something wrong. But his power does all of a sudden seem a little bit limited. But he does have the Violator there, who's making life easier for him. But the Violator's like, hey, I'm doing all this stuff for you. I made the Spawn attack look like a terrorist attack. I'm upholding my end of the bargain. You're supposed to be bugging the crap out of my pal Spawn, and also tightening the noose around Terry, Wanda, and Grandma Blake's neck. So you better get to work, basically. And Wynn says that he will. Meanwhile, we check in on Cy-Gor, who for some reason is just heading south. We're told he's not exactly sure himself. He just knows that he needs to be headed south. He feels the draw, the pull to something. And he actually comes across sort of a honky-tonk out in the middle of nowhere. And there's a man and a woman in the car. And again, maybe a little of its time. It's not 100%. I mean, the woman's not screaming, but the guy's like, hey, I love you. Let's get it on, kind of thing. She's like, you're drunk. He's like, yes, I am. She's like, oh, your breath stinks. It's too cramped in here. Let's go back inside. I mean, she's not out and out saying no, but either way, it's an uncomfortable situation. But what we're told is, from the outside looking in, Cy-Gor looks at this, windows up, young couple activities can't really be seen, conflicting messages, and for some reason, this Cy-Gor, this cybernetic gorilla, is thinking rape. And so he literally rips the top of the car off, grabs this guy, and he's kind of like swinging him around and freaking out and whatever. So again, you get that feeling, just like the gorilla saved the little boy last issue, that there's something in him. There's something, either whose ever consciousness got transferred into him, or something built into programming, something that says, hey, he's supposed to be, saving people or doing the right thing or whatnot. So once he leaves that area, he continues on his way south. And we do get a couple of 3 panels here where these guys are supposedly been hired to track him. It sort of feels a little out of place because we don't have any context. We don't know who hired them. I don't know. It feels weird. But even though this is apparently the end of the Cy-Gor, this issue is the end of the Cy-Gor story for now, clearly there's more to come. So meanwhile, Spawn wakes up and he's trying to figure out a way to escape before they ship all his body parts off to wherever. And Curse comes and removes his brain to figure out how that works. So he's able to hook a cart that's next to him and pull it over. It has a lot of the instruments that were used to dissect Spawn, and Spawn literally hacks off his own hand, and he's going to use it to try to break out his costume. That's his plan anyway. But what happens is, because there's no weight behind it, and also the drugs, the sedatives they've been giving Spawn, when he tries to smash into the glass case that's holding the costume, the symbiotic costume that's been separated from him, it just doesn't have enough weight or power behind it. And it's not too long before Curse returns and even says, hey, it's time for my final triumph. I'm going to take your brain out. And then he realizes, oh, wait, you cut off your own hand. Well, that took a lot of bravery, although it was, probably futile. But yeah, I'm glad you're awake, because now you can experience these final moments of your life as I remove your brain. And just as he's about to do that, the costume does break free. So apparently, even though it didn't look like the fist was hitting the containment unit hard enough, it did create, we're told, a hairline fracture, which was enough for the symbiotic costume to sense there was a weakness, and it uses its power, and it escapes, and all hell's breaking loose in the lab. And It's literally swallowing up all these different pieces of Al Simmons' body. You know, all the ones that were packed up in jars and whatnot and ready to ship out. It's literally, you know, swallowing them up. And the costume does look very alien and symbiotic here, much like Venom, which is another, you know, McFarlane co-creation. So really getting that feeling, and really you get that feeling right from, at least I did, right from the start, based on the timing of when Spawn was created. You know, you hear symbiotic costume, it's the 90s, you're going to think of Venom. So, and I pointed it out because we'll talk about it more next issue. But anyway, this costume, this symbiotic costume, it needs Al Simmons to be alive and be together and be in one piece. So it makes total sense that once it had a chance, it was able to break free, and it's literally swallowing, we're told. It rampages now with direction, swallowing the former Al Simmons piece by piece, limb by limb. So we see on that page sort of a scarecrow type, we're told, version of Al Simmons. Like, you know, this alien symbiotic costume has swallowed all the pieces and it's trying to put them back together. But again, it's not a real body. It doesn't heal, you know, just lickety split like a real body. Not that a real body does, but it doesn't heal at all. Al Simmons has to, you know, expend energy to heal, but it's trying to provide some framework. So at this point, Curse is like, no, you're not going to escape. You know, you never start a war, never do anything if you're, you know, never devote yourself to a cause unless you're willing to die for that cause. And so he's got the whole place booby-trapped, actually, and he manages to hit the detonator, and the issue ends with the whole castle exploding. And we're told next issue, the aftermath. So really fast-paced issue, a lot of action, some great artwork. I mean, that explosion, first of all, just the hideout on the hill looked great. Curse is, you know, an interesting megalomaniac fanatic. A lot of the scenes with the costume where it's breaking out and flowing around like this sort of liquid goo are interesting. The helpers of Curse that look like little Jawas, little gremlins of some sort are interesting. So really enjoyed the great Capullo art. Also, for the first time, we got to see Capullo draw Cy-Gor, who I sort of like the rendition of Cy-Gor that Capullo gives us. It's got a little bit more of a defined shape and looks a little bit more robotic. And then, of course, the flashback issues, which are also drawn really, really well, and some great color work from Brian Haberlin. So, yeah, really fast-paced issue. We didn't check in on Wanda and Terry, but we did check in on Violator and Jason Wynn, so I appreciated that. Some context for Al Simmons. So, yeah, all in all, a really, really solid issue. Now, you know, being that we were told that we were going to have the end of the story with what we got last time with the gorilla issue, I really feel like we didn't necessarily. I mean, it's not terrible, because now it's like, okay, we told you we were going to get the end, now you're going to get the aftermath of what happened. Did Spawn survive? Or what kind of shape is he in? What's Cy-Gor really doing? Like, there's still a lot of stuff to be decided here. So wouldn't necessarily say that it's all wrapped up, but that's sort of Spawn, right? That's one of the things I love about the story. Yes, it's of its time. You can certainly see right here that it's not like McFarlane is writing for the trade, right? I mean, that wasn't even a thing at this time. Not that you couldn't collect these stories, but there are threads that run much longer than 4 or 6 issues. And that's what I love. So even when we're told, we're going to get the resolution, and maybe we don't, you get an ending, and then maybe that just means that that particular character is going to go sit on the shelf for a while, like the Freak, or like Curse did until he showed up last issue. So I don't mind it necessarily, but I don't know that we necessarily need to say things like, oh, next issue we get the end of the Cy-Gor story or what have you, because none of this is really the end of the story, especially when we know there's 300 or 280 more issues to come, right? So anyway, it was a really fast-paced issue. Really enjoyed the art, and we'll see what issue 42 brings. So really appreciate everybody joining as always, and we will talk to you next time.